Evacuation. More than 100,000 men, women, and children, all of Japanese ancestry, removed from their homes in the Pacific Coast states to wartime communities established in out-of-the-way places. Their evacuation did not imply individual disloyalty, but was ordered to reduce a military hazard at a time when danger of invasion was great. Two-thirds of the evacuees are American citizens by right of birth. The rest are their Japanese-born parents and grandparents. The people are not under suspicion. They are not prisoners. They are not internees. They are merely dislocated people, the unwounded casualties of war. The time, spring and summer of 1942. The place, 10 different relocation centers in unsettled parts of California, Arizona, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, and Arkansas. The relocation centers are supervised by the War Relocation Authority, which assumed responsibility for the people after they had been evacuated and cared for temporarily by the Army. A relocation center, housing from 7,000 to 18,000 people. Barrack-type buildings divided into compartments. 12 or 14 residence buildings to a block. Each block provided with a mess hall, bathhouse, laundry building, and recreation hall. About 300 people to a block. The entire community bounded by a wire fence and guarded by military police, symbols of the military nature of the evacuation. Each family, upon arrival at a relocation center, was assigned to a single-room compartment, about 20 by 25 feet. Barren, unattractive. A stove, a light bulb, cots, mattresses, and blankets. Those were the things provided by the government. The family's own furniture was in storage on the West Coast. Scrap lumber, perhaps some wallboard, and a great deal of energy, curtains, pictures, drapes, depending on the family's own ingenuity and taste, helped to make the place livable. Some families built partitions to provide some privacy. Others took what they received and made the best of it. The 300 or so residents of each block eat in a mess hall, cafeteria style. Rough wooden tables with attached benches. The food is nourishing, but simple. A maximum of 45 cents a day per person is allowed for food, and the actual cost is considerably less than this, for an increasing amount of the food is produced at the centers. A combination of Oriental dishes to meet the tastes of the Issei, born in Japan, and of American-type dishes to satisfy the Nisei, born in America. Lands that had never been occupied or farmed were chosen for most of the relocation centers. Most of the land was covered with desert growth, or with timber in the case of the Arkansas centers. It had to be cleared before farming could start. Then it had to be leveled, and irrigation ditches laid out or rebuilt in order that the people could produce a part of their own food. Then came the plowing and preparation of the soil and planting. A few of the centers had crops in 1942. In 1943, all of them. About half of the evacuated people were farm folk, skilled producers of vegetables, fruits, and other crops. They had made desert lands productive before, and around the relocation centers they could and did do it again by the application of hard work and water for irrigation. At the two centers in Arkansas, they have introduced Western-type irrigation and succeeded in producing vegetables in the heat of midsummer, when ordinary production methods are not successful. Tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, corn, melons, and many other crops have been grown on land that a year or 2 years ago was unproductive. Food production is aimed at self-support for the relocation centers. It does not go onto the open market. From the fields, it goes to the center warehouse. From there, it may go to the kitchen, or it may be shipped to other centers. The Arizona centers are most productive in winter. The others produce only in summer or fall, so vegetable crops are exchanged. Besides the workers engaged in farming, it takes many others to handle food, in the warehouses, in transportation, in the kitchens. To keep the rolling equipment, trucks, cars, and tractors in operation, it takes mechanics and machinists. Water mains have to be laid and repaired. Roads, sanitation systems, and buildings have to be maintained. At the Arkansas centers, the land is covered with trees, and the clearing process provides lumber for construction and firewood for heating. Those who work are paid. Wages by outside standards are low. $12 a month for beginners, $16 a month for most of the workers, and $19 for professional people such as doctors and others on skilled or difficult work. The workers also receive a small cash allowance for clothing. The money received as wages lets an evacuee buy the things he needs, which are not provided by the government. But most have had to draw on their savings to live as they would like to. In each center, a cooperative business association operates stores which handle clothing, toilet articles, and the merchandise which would be needed in any community. The co-ops also run barber shops, beauty parlors, shoe repair shops, and other services for the community. When the school bell rings, it's a signal for these students at Hart Mountain in Wyoming to change classes. The school curriculum meets the standard of the state where the center is located. Mathematics, American history, geography, the fundamentals of an American education. This is a class in mathematics. And a rhythm class of 5th grade pupils. In the modern school, many subjects are added to reading, writing, and arithmetic as part of the schoolwork. Some of the teachers are Caucasian. Some are evacuees, Americans of Japanese ancestry. The 1st graders in this class, taught by an evacuee teacher, are making colored drawings which will decorate the walls of their barrack building classroom. The same kind of beautifully clumsy drawings that can be found in almost any 1st grade room. In the high schools, vocational training gets plenty of attention. Scientific farming, studied in school and in the field. And older boys are learning trades. They use them first as part of the regular work of the relocation center, as welders, mechanics, machinists. Frequently, learning to do the necessary jobs in a relocation center have led to better jobs outside. Health protection is part of the obligation assumed by the government. Evacuee doctors and nurses serve in the hospital under the supervision of Caucasians. Dentists, oculists, and pharmacists also. The Japanese professional men and women, most of them American citizens, had their own practices on the West Coast before evacuation. Many of them now are in the Army Medical Corps, and others have replaced doctors and other health workers in communities outside the centers. The health service in relocation centers, in proportion to population, is about like that of any other American community in wartime, barely adequate. The evacuees have a form of community self-government which aids the appointed officials in administration of the community. A community council of evacuees is elected to make rules and regulations. Anyone 18 years old or older is eligible to vote in the elections, which are carried on in the democratic manner. A judicial commission sits in judgment on minor offenses. Attorneys among the evacuees represent the prosecution and the defense. A serious crime would be tried in the regular courts outside the center. The crime rate among people of Japanese ancestry in the United States always has been extremely low, and this has proved to be the case in the centers. After working hours, over weekends, a relocation center is the scene of baseball and softball games by the dozen. The teams are counted by the hundreds. The evacuees have provided practically all of their own equipment, for little government money has been spent for strictly recreational purposes. In the fall, touch football is in season, and more quiet forms of recreation. The relocation centers include many well-known artists. Amateur and professional artists and craftsmen have used their spare time in creating beauty in many different forms. Sunday church services. Advanced preparations include carrying the benches into the barrack building. Most of the alien Japanese are Buddhists, but almost half their American-born children belong to some Christian denomination, Catholic, Methodist, Presbyterian. Except for state Shinto involving emperor worship, there is no restriction on religion in relocation centers. Boy Scouts, who usually provide the color guard for the American flag which floats over each center, are typical of the American organizations which are prominent in each relocation center. There's a USO Club to provide entertainment for the Japanese-American soldiers who come to the center to visit their families or friends. Girl Scouts, Campfire Girls, Parent-Teacher Associations, the Red Cross. The evacuees belong to these organizations in their former homes and transplanted them to the centers. The Boy Scout Drum and Bugle Corps here is leading a harvest festival parade, marking the high point of the successful season of farm production. Everyone turns out to view the beauty queen, to see the well-decorated floats, and to join in the good time that goes with the full day of celebration. While they have many things in common with ordinary American communities, in the really important things, relocation centers are not normal and probably never can be. Home life is disrupted. Eating, living, and working conditions are abnormal. Training of children is difficult. Americanism, taught in the schools and churches and on the playgrounds, loses much of its meaning in the confines of a relocation center. When the War Relocation Authority was only a few months old, it was decided that relocation centers should not be maintained any longer than necessary. The first people to leave the relocation centers were volunteer workers recruited to help tend and later to harvest the sugar beet crop of the western states. Almost 1/10 of the evacuees volunteered for this seasonal work in 1942. The result of their labors was a year's sugar ration for about 10 million people. But work in the beet fields was temporary. Most of the people returned to the centers. The War Relocation Authority has been more concerned with permanent relocation, getting the evacuees out of the backwaters of the relocation centers into the mainstream of American life, so their labor can help to win the war, so the cost to the taxpayers may be reduced, so there can be no question of the constitutionality of any part of the action taken by the government to meet the dangers of war, so no law-abiding American need to fear for his own freedom. Relocation of the evacuees is not being carried on at the sacrifice of national security. Only those evacuees whose statements and whose acts leave no question of their loyalty to the United States are permitted to leave. All information available from intelligence agencies is considered in determining whether or not each individual is eligible to leave. Those who are not eligible to leave have been moved to one center to live presumably for the duration of the war. The others, established as law-abiding aliens or loyal Americans, are free to go whenever they like. Thousands already have gone. Here are a few of them. Nobura Aramura is examining corn for insects in a field in Illinois. Kenneth Sugioka used to operate his own orchard in Hollister, California. Machine work was a hobby. Now it's his job. He's making precision parts for American bombers. Masako Takayoshi is assistant head nurse in a large hospital. She was a teaching supervisor of nurses in a Seattle hospital before evacuation. She has 3 brothers, all in the Army. The tractor driver here is Roy Himoto, who used to farm near Walnut Grove, California, and was evacuated to the Tule Lake Center. This young machinist has learned his trade since he relocated to Chicago, and his boss says he learned it well. He's helping to make kitchen equipment. Mrs. Ayako Kasai paints miniature dolls in a Midwestern studio. She used to live at Colusa, California, and then lived at the Granada Relocation Center. In the background is Cecilia Miyamoto, who divides her time now between working and attending college. Kei Nakadoi feeds the chickens on an Illinois farm, and on the same farm is an Issei, Kamago Shimatsu. Shinobu Sakuma, Joe Chihara, and Yoshio Dogen cultivate potatoes on a farm in the Middle West. This is Ruth Nishi. Her father ran a fruit stand in Berkeley, California, and Ruth helped him. After living in the Poston Relocation Center, she moved to Chicago and has become a skillful turret lathe operator. These young men spraying potatoes are from the Minidoka Relocation Center. This boy liked the printing trade, but had no chance to learn it until after he had left the relocation center. He's helping to print some of the nation's supply of magazines. American eggs are shipped all over the world, to Americans in the armed forces and to our allies. Mary Higuchi breaks eggs which are to be dried. And in the same plant, John E. Amuri feeds the drying machine. Jim Carisu used to be a clerk in Madera, California. Now he's a candy maker in Chicago. American flags, some of them for the armed forces, are turned out by Mrs. Yoshie Abe. She hopes that one of the flags she makes someday may be carried in triumph down the streets of Tokyo. The produce business in Watsonville, California, used to be home to these boys. Now they're in the produce business in Denver. Henry Ligoro used to be a farmer at Fresno, California. From the Jerome Relocation Center, he moved to the Middle West to make marshmallows. Threshing oats in the Middle West is a new experience to Tet Shiota, who used to grow vegetables near Venice, California. An artificial leg doesn't interfere with the way he handles a pitchfork. This young fellow, operating a bookbinding machine, is typical of the evacuees who are adjusting to new communities, getting along with their employers, fellow workers, and neighbors, and finding satisfaction in becoming self-supporting once more. The Americanism of the great majority of America's Japanese finds its highest expression in the thousands who are in the United States Army. Almost half of them are in a Japanese-American combat team created by order of the Secretary of War early in 1943. Some of the volunteers came from Hawaii, some from the eastern part of the United States mainland where there was no mass evacuation. Hundreds of them volunteered while they were in relocation centers, volunteered to fight against the militarism and oppression of Japan and Germany. They know what they're fighting against, and they know what they're fighting for, their country, and for the American ideals that are part of their upbringing: democracy, freedom, equality of opportunity, regardless of race, creed, or ancestry.
We do want women in department stores and other civilian jobs, but we need them in war plants too. Women who have had no industrial experience are trained by the United States Employment Services or sent by them to factories that teach future workers. Individual consultation determines for what kind of work the applicant is best suited.
Would you like to work in a factory?
I don't know anything about machines.
Can you drive a car? Ride a bicycle? Can you replace a burnt-out fuse?
Oh, yes, I can do that.
Then you can be trained for a job, and the training won't cost you a cent.
With the strides that have been made in industrial methods, there is practically no limit to the types of work that women can do. In classrooms, they learn to be inspectors by studying with enlarged models of precision instruments. With a micrometer and the vernier gauge, they can measure accuracy to the 1/10,000th of an inch. Experience has proved that women are especially well adapted to the drawing of blueprints. In one experimental aircraft factory, the entire drafting room is staffed by women. They are taking to welding as though the welding rod were a needle and the metal a length of cloth to be sewn. After a short apprenticeship, a woman can operate this drill press as easily as a juice extractor in her own kitchen. And a lathe will hold no more terrors for her than an electric washing machine. But it is not only heavy industry that needs women. They are wanted in hundreds of essential civilian services that must be kept functioning. They have taken over routine jobs at non-military airports. Railroads are carrying an unprecedented load of troops, war materials, and civilian traffic. Women help to keep the irreplaceable rolling stock in good running order. They are collecting fares and driving buses. The messenger boys of today are girls. Office buildings are using girls to run the elevators. Many communities already have women on milk delivery routes. They handle man-sized tractors on the vast farms of the Middle West. And more than man-sized mule teams. Now, some men are worried.
My wife works, people think I can't support her.
Oh, I don't mind my wife working, but who's going to run my home?
It's okay now, but what about after the war? The women will have all the jobs.
Some men asked these questions during the last war. This is what happened then. Women wanted to take an active part in the war as they do today. Nurses saw duty overseas at base hospitals. With the drawing off of so many men to the front came an inevitable labor shortage. The old prejudice against women in heavy industry was broken by the demand for more manpower. And women found work not only in nursing, but in factories, railroad yards, and on the farms. Yeomanettes were the vanguard of our waves. This old newsreel shows them being reviewed by the Secretary of the Navy, Josephus Daniels, and the Assistant Secretary, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Those were the true glamour girls of the last war, remembered with affection and appreciation for the work they performed when the world then as now was in peril. Women are needed again. Before the end of the year, 2,400,000 more must be enrolled in war work, which means not only in the Army, the Navy, the Marines, but in the factories, on the farms, in various essential civilian occupations now filled by men who are being called to the colors. Every woman who can possibly help is wanted. Their country is calling them.
Yesterday, the pioneer woman helped to win a continent. Today, with the same spirit of determination, American women are working to save this way of life, working to save the nation from the impact of total war, working to build a sure defense. American women are alert to the dangers which threaten our democracy today. Women trained in science are testing and observing and working to discover new ways to meet this threat. Other women, skilled and unskilled, are asking, what can I do to help? This film will show what women are doing and what they can do. Every woman has an important place in the National Defense Program, in science, in industry, and in the home. Silk is vital to national defense. Its most important use is for parachutes and powder bags. New substitutes are being perfected in the laboratory to meet the growing demand. Normal wear is hard on clothes, but not so hard as a machine like this. And there is a direct relation between an abrasion tester, clothing, and national defense. Durability and economy are important to American consumers called on to make sacrifices in this emergency. Defense is more than military equipment and armed forces. Defense is keeping the nation strong and healthy. In this important work of defense, our scientists are experimenting with small animals to find out things about vitamins. A complete report of their reaction and growth is recorded after they are given experimental food formulas, during which they are carefully checked and weighed. New and health-giving diets are being developed through this research. This woman is a modern pioneer, a scientist. She symbolizes the tremendously important work of women in chemistry, in bacteriology, in physics, in nutrition, in medicine, in hundreds of hospitals and laboratories throughout our country. Men and women who work on the production of our defense weapons must be well nourished. Good nutrition is not entirely a question of income. Thousands of women are attending free lectures on how to buy food and prepare meals which are nutritious and economical. Women working in industrial plants need costumes which are comfortable and safe around machinery. Uniforms which meet these needs have been designed. Two-thirds of the jobs in defense industries can be done by women today, and officials of the defense program are advocating more extensive job training for women and girls. These girls, already trained in our new defense program, are able to turn out small machine parts. More women are being trained in mechanical trades to meet the shortage of skilled labor for drilled presses, turret lathes, milling machines, planers, and welding equipment. Women are being recruited daily to help make planes for the nation's air forces. 3 million women in factories all over the country are making things, sewing strong fabrics, sewing control surfaces for our fighter planes. In a war in which so many machines and tools and so much metal is required, it is strange how much sewing there is. Women are bringing a natural skill to an important job. Their efficient contribution is helping us to speed up production of bombers and fighting ships. One parachute takes 65 yards of silk. Only silk has the lightness and strength essential in making parachutes. Women who have had special training in the manufacture of this product are the only ones who can be employed in these factories. A man's life depends on every parachute, so there is no margin for error. The nimble fingers of these women are capable of turning out perfect workmanship on unbelievably fast-running machines. These highly specialized industries are finding women extraordinarily efficient and are using them more and more in the making of precision instruments which are so essential in war today. All of these instruments require ball bearings or roller bearings, bearings so precise that experts must use a microscope for assembly. This is work in which women excel, giving it constant care and alertness. Women's hands, thousands of them, skillful, patient, and accurate, are assembling parts precisely dimensioned, without which no bomber could fly, and without which no mechanized land unit could move. Every ship that glides down the ways must have electrical switches. Women today are assembling, gauging, fitting together, riveting, drilling, and making them. This work requires fingers that move with lightning speed. Every defense worker doing her job well. That's the battle of production and the essence of defense. Women are working side by side with men on the assembly lines and in inspection units of munition factories. Millions of shells are moving off the production lines in our great plants from coast to coast. Shells for tanks and naval guns. Shells for coast and field artillery. Shells for anti-aircraft defense. Women are skillful in gauging and checking for minute imperfections. Mass production is important when you realize that a single machine gun can fire 1,400 rounds a minute. Again, we turn to the women who are asking, what can I do for defense? The American Women's Voluntary Services provides instruction in many basic skills to over 80,000 women. Soon, the Office of Civilian Defense will cooperate not only with the AWVS, but with all other private and public agencies to aid volunteers in obtaining the training they want, a training indispensable in war, valuable in peace. The Red Cross today is the culmination of the work of a woman who pioneered under the duress of a war. Clara Barton, its founder, determined that the care of the wounded should not be left to the unskilled. Today, true to its tradition, the American Red Cross volunteers are responding to the needs of war-distressed peoples. 25 million and more surgical dressings have already been sent to Europe. Medical science's newest weapon against death is the blood bank. Thousands of women today are giving their blood, giving the essence of life to save life. Our history is full of the inspiration which our pioneer women left us as a proud heritage. And again today, American women are stirred by that heritage, serving their country in the laboratory, on defense production lines, in the civilian defense services, and in the home, which is, after all, the first line of defense. Women have always been the guardians of the home and the children, the future of our country. And they are determined that our democracy shall survive and that our precious freedoms shall be.
The American farmer has fed us for 200 years. War or peace, depression or prosperity. It's been a hard, plodding job, but the farmer has kept us alive. Not only that, but made us the best fed nation in the world. 130 million people asked a lot of the farmer, and most of us took it for granted he'd go on producing the food we needed, and he did. But in the 10 years before the war, he'd been having a hard time making both ends meet, and sometimes he wondered if he could make a go of it. Yes, he wondered while he was working. That's thunder you're hearing, farmer, but it's a long way off. A man named Hitler. He says all he wants is the Polish corridor in Danzig. Will they give it to him, or will the lightning strike? Keep your eye on that sky, farmer. Listen hard, because if it does, that's it. Get going, farmer. You've got a job to do. There's a war on now, and while it's not your war, not yet, you never can tell. Wartime production, 1940, tomatoes.
900 million bushels.
Eggs.
37 billion.
Hitler's in Poland now. Hogs.
16 billion pounds.
They've just bombed Rotterdam. Milk.
107 billion pounds.
I'll bet you know where Dunkirk is now. That thunder you heard is falling on London now, and Plymouth and Coventry. Listen, farmer.
I'm hungry. Hungry.
She's talking to you. Never heard her before, huh? Well, she's English and she's hungry. She needs you. Oh, I know what you're thinking. The last war.
Farmer, save democracy. Farmer, save the world. Dig, farmer, dig.
So you dug. And when it was all over and Europe started eating its own food again, you sat around looking at your new machinery and mortgages. But come on, farmer. You haven't time to think. Norway's gone now, and Yugoslavia, Greece, too.
You're Galotin.
That's a Russian soldier, farmer. Feed him. He's fighting for you. Poland, Belgium, Holland, France, Norway, England, Russia, China. Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Why, that's us.
Hey, farmer, get going. I'm hungry.
That's an American Marine farmer. And there are 10 million more soldiers, sailors, flyers who have to eat. This is our war now, farmer. We're all depending on you. Yeah, I know, you're tired. Your hired man's quit you. You're all alone. You can't get your work done. Don't think about it. Haven't time. Don't let it bother you. Corn, milk, livestock, never mind what, only don't stop. Don't stop working. Maybe you'd like to see what happens every time you stop. Okay, farmer. When I count 3, you stop. 1, 2, 3.
I'm hungry. Hungry.
The loading. That's Lend-Lease. It's stopped because you've stopped. Only 6% of American food goes abroad, but they have to have it. You've stopped, and 10 million American fighting men are hungry.
No tanks, ships, planes, no fighting anywhere.
You've stopped, and 130 million American civilians are hungry.
No welders, no riveters, no work anywhere.
Get going, farmer. It's up to you.
Farmer, save democracy.
More barley.
Farmer, save democracy.
More corn.
Farmer, save the world.
More beans.
Farmer, save the world.
More milk.
More.
More rhubarb.
More.
More spinach.
More.
More grapefruit.
More.
More cabbage.
More.
More grain.
More grain for bread, grain for life. This is me again, the Marine. When do I eat?
Fine.
You're galording.
How about me, farmer? Yes, get going.
I gotta eat too.
More food.
Hey, you out there. Quiet, quiet. This is as fast as I can go. I'm short-handed, lacking seed and fertilizer, using old patched-up machinery, and every available acre's under cultivation. Seems to me if I was one of them big fellas in Washington, I'd just set me down and do a bit of thinking. Kind of try to figure out some system to spread the food all over thin so it'll cover more. See what I mean? Because I'm warning you, that's all you're going to get. That's all I can give you. No more. Do you hear me? No more. From now on, it's up to you.
They heard him in Washington and worked out a system to make the food go around. A plan to see to it that everyone gets an equal share of what there is. That plan is called rationing.
So here's a plan that's fair and square. Everybody gets their share. No more griping anywhere. Get the point, Mrs. Brown. One for you and one for me. It's as clear as ABC. Share alike for victory. Get the point, Mrs. Brown. That's what a rationing plan is for, Mrs. Brown. Mrs. Jones, the grocery man or the butcher store, your share is there with the Kellys and Combs. Equal service in the stores, fancy pants or cotton drawers. She gets hers and you get yours. Get the point, Mrs. Brown.
And so Mrs. Brown and most people want to make rationing work. But there are still a few who get what they want any way they can, who will pay any price in the black market. Wait a minute. What's going on here?
Give me a nice small sirloin. About that thick.
That thick?
You heard me. That thick.
Well, madam, we're here to serve you, but that'd run about 3 pounds. Now, you haven't enough ration stamps for that. But I could let you have a nice steak about half that size.
Half that size? What do you think I am? A pigeon?
Oh, wait a minute, madam. Maybe I can fix you up after all. But it costs you 80 cents a pound.
80 cents? Well, that's ridiculous.
That's just what I keep saying.
Wonder the government wouldn't do something about it. All this talk about price ceilings.
Well, do we take it or do we leave it?
Well, I'll take it. I guess you'll have to pay to get what you want these days.
That's right. I have to go downstairs to get it.
Margaret Gibbs, you know who I am. I'm your conscience. No use running. You can't get away from me. That's right, Margaret. Come back. Come on. What do you want? Tell me, my dear. What are you doing in this black market?
Well, I only wanted a little piece of red meat. You know how peaked I get when I don't have any for a while.
You? Peaked? Don't make me laugh. And what if you do get a bit faint?
That's it. That's it. Faint. I feel it coming on every afternoon about 4 o'clock.
You feel it coming on. How about the 10 million American soldiers and sailors and Marines? Would you rather have them feeling faint?
Well,
Now, Maggie Gibbs, you know all the answers, the real answers, don't you? Then tell them to me. Come clean. Purge yourself before it's too late.
I knew it was the black market. I know why we have shortages and where the food is going. And what's more, I know how the black market operates.
You're doing well, Margaret.
By buying in the black market and showing dishonest butchers I'll pay anything to get what I want, I encourage meat bootlegging.
Very good.
You want to know something else?
Certainly.
I never feel faint at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm strong as a horse. Only I like steak.
You're a good girl, Margaret Gibbs. A good girl.
Even rationing isn't any good unless we make it work. It's still up to us. And there are an awful lot of people in the world depending on us. They're in Guadalcanal and Iceland and Tunisia. To fight, they need twice as much food as they needed when they were civilians. So do they get that steak or don't they? Because it's a very simple proposition. If we do, they don't. Remember what the farmer said? It's up to you.
It's up to you, mister. What do you say? It's up to you, sister. Starting today, if all our soldier boys can grin and bear it, and you can fix that shoe and you can wear it, and you can cut down food and you can share it, mister, sister, it's up to you. It's up to you to do it if it's done. Yes, it's up to you to win it if it's won. Oh, it's up to you to stretch it and make it go around. It's up to you to do it if it's done. Yes, it's up to you to do it if it's done. Get it done, get it done. It's up to you.
Hello, America. This is John B. Hughes speaking. I've just completed a trip across the country, getting one of the most amazing war stories of 1943. It's your story, America. I'm going to give it to you just the way it was told to me. In 1943, American ingenuity developed the most terrifying war weapons ever conceived by man. But one of the mightiest weapons produced in 1943 received little publicity. It was not built in the booming war plants. It was forged by the people of a little town in Indiana, by the people of another little town in Iowa. It was produced in hundreds of teeming cities. What is this weapon we cannot see, yet which is so vital to victory? It is American food, perhaps the most potent war weapon ever forged in the arsenal of democracy. In 1943, 6 million American farmers broke all food production records for the 7th straight year.
Mr. Harvey.
How do you do?
I've come out here to try to get the story of how the American farmers beat production records in 43.
Oh, shucks, mister. It's not much of a story.
Oh, no. What about the farm manpower shortage, and the lack of new machinery and parts, and the floods, and 100 other handicaps that could have licked you?
Reckon we just outstubborn them.
Well, I'd like to hear about it, and so will the American people.
Why, sure, if it's really important. first thing our local farm committeemen told us was what kinds of food the country needed and why. The farmers were asked to plant 364 million acres in 43. That meant a big increase for all of us. They wanted lots more special war crops, too. Well, we plotted out our land and went to work. It was mostly 12 to 16 hours a day and no days off. But we figured our own farm boys were doing a lot more over there. Neighbor helped neighbor, and our women and kids pitched in with the men. Those quotas had to be met. There was no time to lose. You can't shut down a farm like you can a war factory, then start her up again. We had our troubles naturally, but when we couldn't get spare tractor parts, we used baling wire. Then there were floods that washed out our seed, but we planted more. There wasn't enough feed supplied, and there was no feed to buy, or fertilizer, or tools, but we managed all right. We had our own victory gardens, too. They fed our families, sort of helped ease the country shortage.
6 million farm victory gardens on top of everything else. Don't you people ever get tired?
Not with this war to be won.
Okay, Mr. Harvey. So there's just one more miracle to explain. We've all heard about the farm manpower shortage. What did you do for labor in harvest time?
Well, I reckon that's Bob Hopkins' story, mister. He runs the main store in Midvale.
Sure, we were busy here, but we weren't too busy to help the farmers. Neither were plenty of other towns like Midvale. Those farmers are the men who feed the men who feed the guns. Well, first off, our small town newspapers all over the country donated space, and our movie theaters volunteered to run special slides telling folks how much they is needed to help with harvesting the crops.
We fired our appeal at the housewives, who could usually give a few hours a day, at businessmen who could spare an employee 1 or 2 afternoons a week, at teenage kids who could earn good summer vacation money on farms. Then we used the radio to carry our message to city people.
Next week, the berry crop will be ready to pick, the biggest crop in the history of this county. Our farmers are short of workers to harvest this vital crop. No time can be lost. Your help is needed.
We wanted working girls who couldn't go anywhere for their vacations, city boys who'd be better off on farms than playing in tenement streets, Boy Scouts and campfire girls. It was wonderful how those Americans came from the towns and the cities. Most of them had never worked on farms before, but they went at it like beavers to get the crops out. They got good housing, good food, and a new lease on health. Well, sir, it's hard to believe, but in 1943, more than 4 million volunteers worked on American farms and in the processing plants. There's a big processing plant near here, but last year, only 100 workers showed up when they needed 4 times that many. So they came for help. Our wives left their bridge tables to answer the call. Our merchants closed their stores to help. We even let the kids out of school. Something that didn't exactly break their hearts. Maybe we didn't know much about the food processing business, but we soon learned. And that's one example of what happened all over the nation in 43. No wonder this country's never been licked.
And it never will be with spirit like that. Well, I'm off to get the story of our victory gardeners. Uncle Sam asked for 18 million gardens in 1943 and got 20 million.
Sure, we all had them around here. I understand they did a good job in the cities, too, and where it's a whole lot harder to raise vegetables.
Well, I'm going to find out how they did it. I have an appointment with the mayor of your biggest city.
Yes, Mr. Hughes, even the mayor has to find time to do his share these days. Our city is mighty proud of its 257,468 victory gardens. They supplied a good half of our vegetables in 1943, not to mention the amount of vital transportation they saved. You'll find their gardens growing among our very skyscrapers, and in almost every backyard with a foot of available space. Victory gardening is the greatest voluntary movement on the home front, and the gardener who becomes discouraged and gives up is letting down his country. What if the farmer gave up? Mr. Hughes, the American victory gardener is the man behind the farmer. In 1943, he produced almost half the country's vegetable crop, or approximately 8 million tons of food worth $500 million.
Mr. Mayor, Every man, woman, and child who picked up a hoe last year was a real soldier on the home front.
Definitely.
Well, I've got my story on the farmer, the volunteer worker, and the victory gardener. Food was indeed one of our most potent weapons in 43. And here's what they produced. Enough eggs, if laid end to end, to reach the moon 7 times. Enough milk, perhaps the most necessary food of all, to float the navies of the United Nations. Enough meat to pave 8 4-lane superhighways from New York to San Francisco, 1 inch thick. Enough cases of canned tomatoes to reach from Boston to Bombay, India. Corn acreage equal to the area of Japan proper. The war is far from won. Yes, how about 1944 in terms of our fighting food? Do you know, America, that it requires a ton of food a year to feed every man in our armed forces? That every fighting man on the battlefronts has a 9-4 will see nearly twice as many Americans overseas. Do you know that besides all this, the average American civilian eats 2/3 of a ton a year? Then there are your fighting allies, those people who have been holding and beating back the enemy for years and are still beating him back. Also, there will be many more liberated in 1944, and they too must be fed if you are to have their friendship and cooperation. Your military leaders want no starving people behind their battle lines, for a hungry man is a dangerous man. These people don't want to be fed forever. They ask only a small part of your food to put them on their feet again. In 1944, even greater convoys must carry your food to the far corners of the world. There will be many precious cargoes that will never reach their destination. Yes, America, you did a great job in 43, but the food battle for 44 will be even greater. What are you going to do about it?
The country expects the farmers to plant 380 million acres this year, 16 million more than in 1943. That's a mighty big order. But Uncle Sam isn't fooling about needing that extra food. And we're not fooling when we say we'll produce it.
We're going to need nearly 5 million volunteers to work on farms and in processing plants this year. That's a good 500,000 more than in 43. It means that 2,500,000 will have to come from the cities. We're appealing mostly to the women and the kids in the city schools. And they'll come all right. They're Americans. The American people have been asked to plant 22 million victory gardens in 1944, an increase of 2 million. We know now how much these gardens mean to the war effort, and this city's rolling up its sleeves and going to work.
Those are the answers your Uncle Sam likes, America. You've heard the amazing food production story of 1943, and the even more amazing job that must be done in 44. It's up to you, America. The plow line is the battle line, but the farmer can't do it alone. Let's get behind him, all of us, and make American food fight